Due to a mid-air emergency, Saudi Flight 163 was forced to make an emergency landing at Riyadh International Airport on August 19, 1980. The crew landed on the runway, where firefighters were waiting to assist, with what appeared to be a smooth landing. However, none of the passengers on the flight that day would survive, even after this successful emergency landing. Flight 163 departed Karachi International Airport, Pakistan, bound for Jeddah International Airport in Saudi Arabia, with a scheduled intermediate stop at Riyadh Airport. The flight arrived in Riyadh and had a 2-hour layover for refueling. During the layover, several of the passengers disembarked. After refueling, the flight took off bound for Jeddah. The flight's captain, 38-year-old Saudi Muhammad Ali, was employed by Saudia in 1965. According to his reports, he was a slow student who required more comprehensive training. Sami Abdullah M. Hassanain, a Saudi national who joined the airline in 1977 after serving as a trainee, was the first officer at the age of 26. 11 days prior to the disaster, he obtained his type rating on the TriStar. He had already been expelled from flying school for performing poorly in past. The airline also employed 42-year-old American Bradley Curtis, a Polish native, as a flight engineer in 1974. After completing his training in the Boeing 707 or 737, he was qualified as a captain of the Douglas DC-3. However, he did not fulfill the necessary qualifications to be a first officer or a captain. To preserve his employment as a flight engineer, he had to pay for his own training. The flight crew was alerted to smoke coming from the cargo area around 7 minutes into the flight. After attempting for the next 4 minutes to verify the warnings, flight engineer Curtis returned to the cabin to check that smoke was present. First officer radioed the captain's decision to head back to the airport. As the fire spread through the operational cable, the thrust lever of the number 2 engine jammed. The engine was then turned off on final approach. Following touchdown, the aircraft proceeded to the end of the runway and stopped on a taxiway, taking 2 minutes and 40 seconds to complete its runway exit. With emergency personnel anticipating an emergency stop and evacuation, the airport's fire rescue apparatus was positioned back on the runway's landing area. This required them to chase after the plane, which had taken the whole 4,000 meters of runway, to slow down before making an emergency landing on the taxiway. The aircraft came to a stop facing away from the landing direction. The crew stated that they were going to shut down the engines and escape as soon as the aircraft had stopped. However, the rescue workers discovered that the 2 wing-mounted engines were still operating when they arrived at the aircraft, making it impossible for them to open the doors. When communication with the crew was lost, these were finally turned off, 3 minutes and 15 seconds after the aircraft came to a stop. Flames were seen through the back windows of the airplane, but there was no visible external fire at this time. 23 minutes after the engine was shut off, ground crew opened the right door. After 3 minutes, the aircraft's interior flashed over and caught fire, destroying it. It is unknown why the captain did not quickly exit the plane. According to Saudi accounts, the crew was unable to get the plug-type doors to open in a timely manner. Most of the passengers and flight attendants are thought to have been either incapacitated during the landing roll or chose not to try opening a door on a moving airplane. Since the cabin pressurization system was on standby, it is known that the aircraft stayed pressurized during the landing roll. The aircraft was discovered with both pressurization hatches nearly closed. In order to depressurize the aircraft upon touchdown, the pressurization hatches ought to have fully opened. All of the casualties were discovered in the forward section of the aircraft, and the crew was discovered still seated in their seats. Several of the non-Saudi nationals, including the American flight engineer, had autopsies. It was clear that they had all passed away long before the door was opened, because they all died from smoke inhalation rather than burns. The compartment C3 fire's origin could not be identified. The aft C3 cargo compartment was where the fire originated, according to the inquiry. The passengers sat in that section of the cabin had to shift forward before the landing because the fire was so strong that it burned through the floor. Within the burned-out wreckage of the airliner, Saudi officials discovered 2 butane stoves and an abandoned fire extinguisher next to one of them. An initial theory was that the fire started in the passenger cabin when a passenger boiled water for tea on his own butane stove. The study turned up no evidence in favor of this theory. All 301 passengers perished when trapped in an aircraft on the ground while it was burning from the inside. Make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay updated for our upcoming videos.